Hey everyone, it's Andre Luck here to share my video for this week. This one's going to be a pretty cool one for me. I'm going to talk a little bit about being a vice president within ticket sales in sports. And I think there's a lot of similarities to being a vice president of sales outside of sports. So I think a lot of this can translate if you're not in sports. But one thing that I have conversations all the time with revenue leaders, and a lot of times people that were in my role before, VPs of ticket sales or directors of sales, senior directors, and just looking back on my time in the role, and then also getting to learn from some of the best that I work with on a daily, weekly basis. I want to share some of those insights. So this could be for people that are currently in the role and looking for ways to stay ahead of the curve and maybe reinvent themselves. They've been in the role for a while. New vice presidents who just to think about what the future looks like and what things that they can do to put themselves on the right track. But even more specifically, I talk a lot to directors, senior directors who are looking to take that next step to be a vice president and curious like what that looks like and what that path is. And as they prepare for their interviews, as they prepare for next steps in their career, how they could best do that. The first thing I would say is there's no real clear path to getting to vice president. I've shared this before in videos, but some come the sales route, more individual contributors, some go the leadership route. I think at the end of the day, it's having the skill set necessary to lead the department to reach the revenue goals and the expectations in the short term, but also set the organization up for success and reaching those revenue metrics in the future. So there's a lot of expectations placed on someone in this role. Sometimes I was joking with someone recently about it's almost like there's this unicorn of a role that this expectation is, but those that want it and are excited about it don't back down from that. They get excited about the high expectations. They want to be the person. They're typically the person that when they played sports, they wanted to take the shot at the end of the game. Like they want that responsibility, they want that challenge, so they don't back down from it, and they're excited about the opportunity and the responsibility that comes with leading a department, especially to achieve high numbers. No one's like, as an organization, let's just be mediocre, let's just get average numbers. Like everyone has high growth targets and everyone wants to achieve growth and outperform their competitors. So you definitely need someone who's driven and motivated by that and gets inspired and can inspire others to do that as well. But this person needs to be a strategic thinker. So not only understanding sales, but has to understand the operation side, so ticket operations and what are the new trends coming with that, revenue operations, and how do they integrate data and infrastructure into their processes and making sure that that's streamlined so that you're collecting data and making informed decisions. Obviously, you need to have a sales background and can sell. If you're going to teach and run a department that can sell, like you need to have had success throughout your career selling. Someone who's a leader, so they can lead an organization, get people, get a department behind them, behind a vision, set a culture, and inspire that group underneath them to achieve their best and buy into the vision. And then a coach. So you need to get down in the weeds sometimes and do sales training and coaching, and whether it's personal coaching or professional coaching or sales coaching, you have to be able to articulate a message that resonates with people and be that coach as well. So there's a ton of hats that you wear as a head of ticket sales or a VP of ticket sales. But again, those are people that are wired for those responsibilities. The challenge, though, is in sports specifically, the tenure of a VP of ticket sales anywhere from 3 to 5 years. It's a little more like 4 to 6 outside of sports from some of the data I looked up. But that could be good turnover and also bad turnover. That could be, someone elevating to a higher role, getting to a C-level role, a president role out of being a vice president. But sometimes there's organizational restructures. The person was doing a great job. It's just the philosophies or the strategies of the new leadership. Maybe they have their own person they want to bring in, or it's just not the right fit from a personality standpoint, or they're just not performing. They're not achieving the goals and expectations, and there's quick turnover. So it's difficult to get comfortable in a role like that, but if you're willing to know that on the front end, it's definitely rewarding being in a role. But when you have expectations like that, you have to be willing to take full ownership of the numbers and the metrics. You can't point fingers, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. Like it is on you. You were the head of that department. You were setting the strategy. You were setting the goals. You are accountable for the performance of that department. So that's someone that knowing that there's going to be high expectations, and potentially even if you meet expectations there could be an opportunity to turn over, you're still willing to go up and show up every day and be successful in a role like that. um, so I'll start here. I look back, I became a vice president of ticket sales in 2020. I wrote a post about this on LinkedIn a few weeks ago. And one thing I talked about is if I could go back to 2020 and be a vice president of ticket sales again for the first time, like what I would do different. And I'll hit on four or five things that as I look and reflect on that, knowing what I know now, and hindsight's 2020, here are some things that I'd do different for those of you out there or those looking to be in a role. The first one is just establishing stronger business relationships at the executive level and with ownership. Um, so locked in on what we were doing day to day and building the team and hiring a lot of positions and filling positions that were open. I had great like personal relationships. I think I got along well with a lot of my peers at the executive level, but like really understanding their business. And a lot of times, if you're the head of sales, head of ticket sales, most people's responsibility is to help drive business for you. So better understanding like in their roles, what are they trying to accomplish? How can we work closer together on business objectives? And then also at the ownership level, that person, that group needs to understand that you have a control of the department, you have a vision for where you're going. So a lot of times you're maybe layered between your boss or bosses and that group, but the more visibility you can get there when you see them at games, when there's events that they're in town, like getting FaceTime and sharing your perspective, your vision, picking their brain and forming a relationship there is key and important, because at the end of the day your boss is responsible for reporting to that person. So you want to know what's coming from them, and then also having a relationship not just at the next level above you, but levels above you too. So working on ways to organically develop and build those relationships. Um, Getting a better understanding of economics. So as sales leaders, we're focused on driving revenue. And a lot of times it's like whatever it takes to get revenue and get tickets sold, that's what we're going to do. But on the finance side, and sometimes even the CEO's involved in that because they oversee all financials for the business. But understanding for your department, what are the economics? Are you profitable as a department? How much does it cost to run your department? What are the expenses that come out of it? Not just the revenue. And like, what's the ratio or the ROI that we're looking to get out of this? And just maybe you're not in that day to day, but at least have an understanding of it and know what numbers your CFO, your finance team, they're looking at, and how you all can work better together, because it's not just about revenue, it's profitability for the business. So a deeper understanding of what those economics look like specifically for your team, the tools, the tech stack, all the additional expenses that you have, and is that showing the right ROI? The other part that's going to be helpful there is that person is going to need to justify your expenses. And if they're ingrained in what you're doing day to day and why you're asking for certain things, or you're explaining it and they understand how that helps drive the business, it just makes for a better conversation where eventually that conversation is going to happen, rather that happen organically as you're going, instead of you're about to sign a deal and then you get hit with 20 questions about why are we making this purchase, and then it becomes almost like a confrontation versus a healthy dialogue and conversation. Another thing I would have done more is get more tapped into the corporate partnerships business. The best way I could liken this outside of sports is, like in tech sales and SaaS, there's almost like a small to mid-sized function that of account executives that focus on that, like an enterprise team. And it seems just from, I've never been in it, from what I see, that there's cohesion there. But in ticket sales, sometimes, unless like it all reports up through the same person, there's almost this divide between ticket sales and corporate partnerships. Maybe sometimes because you're talking to some of the same people. But at the end of the day, if I wasn't in sports, I'd be like, that's sales. Like you guys are all selling and generating revenue for the organization. You all should work very closely together. So understanding not just the ticket sales business, but what are best practices when it comes to corporate partnerships. And in my last role, we eventually got to a point where there was a team that was, split, primarily selling corporate tickets, but then also had the ability to work with and sell corporate partnerships, and there was a lot more cohesion there. It all reported under one person, so there was naturally synergy there. But if there isn't that natural reporting structure, forcing that conversation with your counterpart that oversees corporate partnerships, and how can you merge and bring your teams closer together? Spending more time with your best customers. So I think after 4+ years, you got to meet, people, whether it's on trips you did, events, you get to meet obviously your higher spenders, but the more loyal fans that you have, they come find you and they make a relationship with you. Um, and I got in 2020, I started January and then March the pandemic hit. So that, delayed some of it, but being more proactive and getting out of our bubble of what we're trying to do and build internally with the team. And the most important thing is your customers. What do they like? What do they not like? Having conversation with them, continuous dialogue, going to lunches, meeting them at games, everything like that. Like I said, eventually got to a better place there, but starting out, it was spent more time initially because that could have better informed our decisions I was making as we were going and that we were making as we were going. A lot of it was, through third party from my team or from someone that manages accounts that speaks to people, but hearing it directly, that just gives you a different perspective as you're building out strategies and plans year over year on like what's going to be most impactful. Um, Working with the marketing team is another big one because at the end of the day, they're driving revenue for the organization. They're helping the organization meet its goals. So having visibility, but also opining on the strategy from a marketing perspective, and sharing that dialogue and having alignment. There's a lot of talk about sales and marketing alignment. Like that's a real thing. So that the objectives that they're responsible for are helping drive your business, but then also you're allowing to put input so that they're doing all these things on the marketing side. Like, but is it helping drive what's going to help hit your revenue targets too? And then the two of you also looking at what's best for the business and taking egos out of it, but just having more visibility to the marketing strategy, having opinion on that, developing relationships, and sharing also what we're building on our side so that as they're thinking through their strategy, they know what's coming up and we can plan further ahead and be on top of things. And then the last piece is more of a personal thing, just having confidence that you could do the job. Internally, I felt that, but there's a lot of times you feel you got to prove yourself. There's a chip on your shoulder, and if it's your first time doing it, there's um, there's challenges you're going to face, and you have to expect that. You have to believe that in yourself, you're going to grow every 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and trust in your ability to learn from the mistakes you make because you're going to make a ton of them. But having the confidence that you belong in the role, you're the right person, and having that, you know, presence about you. Some people are just naturally wired and built like that. So having that confidence and knowing that, all right, I got this. I know what I'm doing. Um, so as I was in the role, I got to interact with a lot of vice presidents, still do even now, and my more of my consulting capacity. But whether it was in the role or people that I learned from and studied, I want to hit on some of the traits of the best vice presidents at ticket sales specifically that I saw. But I think this again parlays into just any VP of sales role. The first one I'd say is like these people are decisive. Like the best are decisive. They make decisions. Sometimes it may be the wrong one, but they don't sit around and ponder. Once they make their mind up, they put in action immediately and they get people on board to start working on that decision that they've made. So you have to be very decisive. It's a fast moving business. Can't sit around and think like, oh, maybe this, maybe that. Let's see what plays out. Like you got to make decisions. Very customer centric focus. So not just focused on new sales efforts and everything like that, but like how can you create an experience for the customer? And it's something that I've always been passionate about, but I spent more time on like the new sales side of the business that I wasn't as intentional about what's the experience like for the customer and how do we provide a great experience, because that's probably one of your best sales assets is providing a great customer experience. If they do that, they're going to tell your story for you. They're going to refer business for you, and you're going to see what works and what resonates with them so that you can then go out and recruit or onboard new customers based on what you've been able to create for your current customers. Even if you had a great sales year getting new incremental business, most of your revenue is in your current base. So if you just let that drop off and you're not focused on the experience, I'll touch on that more in a little bit. Um, you're just gonna have this leaky bucket because you're not gonna be able to fill up enough new sales to make up for all the sales that you potentially lost because so much of your revenue is in your current base. Being an effective communicator, so not just talking in a group setting and inspiring people and having an enthusiastic message, but if you think about from the, let's call it the president or the CEO, a message has to get from them, so you need to be able to understand and then articulate that message down to your team, which is probably your directors, And underneath them, they have either managers, individual contributors, multi layers underneath them. So that message that you hear and interpret has to then be relayed to your people a couple channels down. And everyone remembers the game of telephone. Like if you're not a strong communicator and clear with the specific what you want communicated and getting that down to the people on the front lines, then there's not going to be cohesion. And also having clarity in your message and people understand clearly what it is you expect of them and what you're trying to communicate to them and deliver in a way that they're going to receive it, not just the way that you want to say it. That may not be how someone receives messaging. Then the courage to stand behind your beliefs. It's interesting because in a role like this, you always have to be thinking what's next and always looking to innovate. So, although you're looking ahead, your team is in the moment and they're focused on what's going on right now. So, you have to potentially change perspectives, change people's way of thinking, and be challenged and face and met with resistance to start, but then still have conviction in what it is that you believe is the best next path forward. And it could be completely changing your strategy and, standing and having the courage to stand behind that, knowing that it's going to be met with resistance. So that's one thing. And you're going to get challenged and questioned and, not get emotional about that too, but being convicted in, all right, this is the path we want to go. And also being able to walk away if that's not in alignment with your values, your vision, and everything like that, because there has to be alignment above you across at your level on the strategy best path moving forward. And you don't want to regret, or I gave in, or I sacrificed, or I made compromises on my integrity or things that I believed in, but having the courage to stand behind what it is. Also being resilient, you're going to get met with a lot of adversity, a lot of things out of your control in sports. You may have a team that's expected to win the championship and they tank and they're one of the worst teams in the league. You have no control over that. You're still accountable for the numbers and the metrics, and how are you still going to put yourself in a spot to meet those growth targets with things that are out of your control. And then I mentioned earlier just being analytical as well. You can't just be all sales. You have to have strategy behind that too, and a purpose, and working with your partners on the strategy side of the business to do that.